Lawyers and police officers of Reddit, what is the dumbest reason you've seen someone get arrested? In the 1980s I was a detective in Cape Town. One day while driving in Woodstock we saw a group of people chasing a man. So we assisted. Turned out he was suspected of stealing from a passenger in a third-class train carriage. Those are very crowded with many passengers standing close together. In his pocket he had a pay envelope from a local fish packing place, containing no money but a piece of carton in which was written, "Aha. Lekker Jevon, Afrikaans for lol caught you good." The people giving chase insisted that he had pickpocketed someone on the train and jumped out at Woodstock station. Long story short, we traced the owner of the pay envelope. His name and employee number were on the pay envelope, who said that after being pickpocketed twice before and losing a week's wages, he hid his money in his sock and made a decoy with the top of a pack of 30 cigarettes on which he wrote the Afrikaans taunt. The culprit was convicted of theft of an envelope valued at 15 cents and ended up with a criminal record. Full stop. Can't recall what the sentence was, unfortunately. Someone in my town crashed into a telephone pole and took out the power. The road was closed off while things were sorted out. One lady decided she couldn't take the long way home and crashed into the same telephone pole. She was arrested for drunk driving. I was on a ride along. Guy gets pulled over. Hands his brother's ID to the officer. It is not a good match. Officer asks him when he was born. He gets that one right. Asks him how old he is. He's off by 2 years. He's being put in the car and the officer says, "You're the first guy I've arrested for bad math. When's your birthday?" 22nd of February. What year? Oh god. Where to start? The $30 worth of knickknacks someone stole from Walmart? The guy who robbed the gas station down the road from his grandma's, where the teller recognized his voice and called him out by name. The assault with a weapon where the weapon was a frozen poultry? My personal favorite. Or the nurse who decided to use her client's debit card as petty cash? Probably the last one. Woman was 5 years from retirement and will never work as a nurse again. Not my arrest but someone on my job. Got a call from an individual staying in one of the hotels stating he thought he saw a man with a gun on the 3rd floor. The whole squad rolls over there and clears the hotel. No gunman found. Turns out the guy who called was just high off and was seeing shitty. So the hotel manager asks the guy to leave. He reluctantly does so. An officer and one of the SGTS are there to waiting help escort the man out of the hotel while he gathers his belongings. This man was about to leave when he lifts up the mattress and grabs his crack pipes and a couple of crack rocks. Right in front of the officer and sergeant. Promptly placed under arrest. Congratulations. You played yourself. Work for a smaller county. Last fall we got a group of people coming me down from a nearby city to rob a hemp farm, thinking it was weed growing along the highway. Several of the crack team of bandits were arrested and lodged. The kicker is it was explained explicitly how dumb it was. That you can't even get high of the stuff. But the very next weekend they came back down and tried to pull it off again. Only this time the farmer was home and ended up holding them all at gunpoint till we arrived. Underage kid, he was 20. I think. Who has been drinking and still has the beer on him. Decides he's hungry. He goes into a mini mart and hides the beer in his pocket so that no one knows he's been drinking. Goes to buy his snacks and the clerk notices that this kid has tucked extremely noticeable beers into his pocket. Clerk calls the cops and tells them that the kid was shoplifting beer. The cops actually believed the kid's story but arrested him anyway for underage drinking. He spent the night in jail. Not me. But my grandma was a lawyer. She had to defend someone who stole from a store in a city in Hungary around midnight. The only reason they got caught was because they used some matches to light up the place. And that set the fire alarm off. As if that wasn't enough. A few weeks later in court, my grandma tells the judge to look at the kid. How young he was and that he couldn't have been strong enough to break open the door or carry something outside and steal it. At this point the defendant stands up, points at his muscles and shouts, "Hell yeah I could." Full stop. That's basically when my grandma gave up. As far as I know, he got a few months in prison. We never arrested him. But I investigated a fraud where a guy called our department that issue licenses to Captain Oil tankers etc. When they told him he didn't have enough evidence of previous sea experience. He literally emailed in a photograph of him sat at his computer forging a sea service testimonial for his last company and asked, "Is this okay?" Full stop. I was part of our law enforcement unit and we agreed we needed to ask Parliament to add a new merchant shipping offence for being a total f-king idiot. There was a news story in Denmark recently. A guy had stolen the customer hand sanitizer from a pharmacy after he picked up his prescription drugs. Because of his prescription they easily identified him. Police called him and asked him to return it. He refused, so they had to pay him a visit, seize the hand sanitizer and also arrest him. I was a seasonal officer at a beach resort. One day I was stuck in the substation working on a bunch of reports when I hear another seasonal officer and a senior officer get dispatched to a hotel for unknown reasons. 2 hours later and I'm still doing paperwork. In fairness, I took a break for lunch, and both of the officers come in with arms full of large brown paper evidence bags. Like the 2 feet tall ones you out groceries in. They start pulling out the most varied amount of drugs I've seen ever. Something like 2 large vacuum bags of good weed, not the dry tea, 2 pages of LSD tabs, a gallon bag of shrooms and a bunch more. Apparently this 19-year-old had come to the beach to deal. He had paid for a few nights at this hotel. Well, he missed his checkout time and the hotel needed the room, so the housekeeper let herself. She undid the covers and found this buffet of drugs. The kid ended up showing up while the officers were searching his hotel room and they got him. Not a cop or a lawyer. But I knew a guy in high school who got arrested for impersonating a police officer and pulling over a real-life off-duty cop who also happened to know him from high school and found him pretty easily because of that. My dad once got arrested because he didn't believe the cop in civvies was a real cop. So he slapped him. Turns out he really was a real cop. Not a police officer or a lawyer, but someone I went to school with took MDMA and then decided to go for a drive, and the police tried to pull him over and he tried to escape around like 8 red lights and crashed into a prison of all places. You have arrived. I'm from a small town and once this stupid guy decides to rob one of the small grocery stores in town. This idiot apparently didn't have a car as he decides his getaway transport would be a train as the train station is closed. Keep in mind this is a small town where a train comes by every 30 minutes. So not the best idea for a quick escape. Well, the grocery store calls the police who have no problem finding this guy. Why? I used to work at a juvenile detention center. We had a local police department bring in a 10-year-old boy for hitting his house with a broomstick. Currently with the stay-at-home policy in France. When you need to get out for a valid reason, for groceries, doctor etc., you need to print out a form with your details, name, address, reason you're going out etc. Some guys did rob a place and forgot their form at the place they robbed with all their details. Police found them pretty quickly. My sister was a legal assistant for a while when she was in school. She went to a hearing with her lawyer and the judge asked the defendant, "And how much marijuana did you have on you?" To which the defendant responded, "Oh no, your honor. It was cocaine." Not entirely sure how that got messed up. But the judge apparently gave the look of "How f***ing stupid are you?" Back in my first year of uni, a guy in halls who was the biggest druggie ever got super high and called the police because someone in his flat has lots of drugs and was selling them. I know how annoying it is when people do this. But I'm not a lawyer or a police officer. But I do know the dumbest crime I've ever heard of. My dad's helmet from university. A young man walking home from a night out passed a bus depot and decided to take a bus for a spin, help people get home etc. Upon return to the bus depot, he was arrested on a few charges including drink driving, endangering the public, and a weird form of theft as he returned it without prompting. Following the charges, He was released awaiting trial. Likely going to receive a nasty slap on the wrist. Some fines. Maybe a short prison stay. And a suspension of his driving license. Not long before the trial, he needed a good night out with friends. And he walked home past that same bus depot. It was just too tempting. He served 2 years. I work in police dispatch. You would be surprised how many people with warrants call and request officers to come to their house for unrelated things. Guess they just assume the officer won't run them. Edit. My favorite instance of someone shooting theirself in foot was just a couple weeks ago though. Someone calls up and says that another mom at the park is screaming street her kids and would like an officer to come talk to her. I smiled to myself. Told the woman I would get someone headed over. Officers got on scene and sent everyone home because the park is closed due to COVID. Lawyer. Client was arrested because he got drunk one night. Headed home, forgetting he had just moved out of this particular house. Confused when his key didn't work. But too drunk to realize his mistake. Smashed a window to get in. Ate some chips. Then realized his mistake when he noticed all the furniture that wasn't his. He was charged with break and enter. And larceny for eating the chips. Had one of our state troopers bring a guy into the county jail for failure to yield at green light. It was a $20 ticket but the guy kept telling the trooper to arrest him. So he did. Dude cried like a baby when he got booked in. Trooper called his bluff. He got out in about 6 hours. A former co-worker got a speeding ticket. Called to pay the ticket. Person on the other end, there was no record of any citation for him. After a few minutes of back and forth, the person insists he does not have a ticket. A few months later gets pulled over again. After an investigation, it turns out the person on the phone had misheard the information my co-worker had given them. He paid the ticket and they let him leave. Not police, but a guy I knew fell over onto a police officer who thought the guy was attacking him. He got arrested. Sensibly. No charges were pressed and the cop ended up buying the guy pizza to apologize. I saw a Puerto Rican arrested for being in the United States. Illegally. Oops. For those of you who don't know, the people of Puerto Rico are United States citizens. Obligatory, not a lawyer or a cop. But my fiance registered sign as a cop in a major US city. One of his fellow, very overzealous, officers arrested a homeless guy on Christmas Day because he fell asleep in the park. The park closed at 11 PM so he broke the law. Yeah. Everyone gives the officer shit for it still to this day. Not quite. But from the FB page of my old local police dept. Northern Beaches Police Area Command. Strike 1. 8:25 last night patrolling police saw a blue Mazda CX-5 driving in less than a straight line in a Manly. Stopped for a random breath test. The 66-year-old local woman was positive roadside. Back at the station. Her blood alcohol reading was a mid-range 0. 131. Result 1. License suspended. Court date booked. Strike 2. Not long after the woman left the station, police noticed her car had gone from where it was left. They dropped around to her home where they found the car. And her. How did you get home? They asked. I drove. She admitted. Result 2. Car keys confiscated. Additional charges of drive while suspended plus drive under the influence of alcohol. A guy was in lockup all weekend before arraignment. He was arraigned on charges of stealing a single bottle on barbecue sauce. A whole weekend in jail. Just for a single bottle of barbecue sauce. And that's not even the sentence. It's before arraignment. Feel bad for the guy? Turns out he also had an arson hold. Apparently. He burns down buildings to make his BBQ. I'm not a lawyer or police officer, but in my town a man was arrested for slapping his ex-best friend with a fish. I used to find this hilarious. They didn't get arrested. But it's related. A couple friends of mine in college sold the hardest crack of all. Magic the Gathering cards. They ran the school's club and so they were charged with taking the club money, going out to shops and buying loads of cards for the drafts. Nothing illegal in the slightest. Well, for some reason or another they'd long ago gotten into the habit of referring to the cards as product. A huge draft was coming up and they were discussing in their room the logistical challenges of obtaining so much product, properly distributing the product to all the buyers, etc. Like, half an hour and they get a knock on the door. The RA of the floor says so. I'm pretty sure you guys are just silly, but we've got to check your room. Full stop. They'd had a window open and people could hear the conversation, so they'd reported them to campus police. They had a good laugh as campus searched the room for drugs, only finding magic cards. Not my story but my grandfather's. Faintly remember so some details will be left out. It was around the 1970s in NH. My grandpa responded to robbery and when they got there no one was there so they started to investigate the scene when they went around back and saw a guy in all black just chillin' digging through the trash and asked what he was doing. Man steals car. Man runs out of gas. Man calls us for help because other states have spoiled their people by bringing them gas for free. Man also happens to have fully extraditable warrants, so he goes to jail and car is recovered. My dad was friends with the MPs on base because he was the bartender in the bar they frequented. I got a second-hand account of 4 dudes blazed out of their minds in the dorms. When the drug dog nosed the door open they proceeded to praise and pet him as the MPs walked in. Who's a good boy? You are. Who's getting reprimanded? We are. Cops in my town tried to arrest a black guy for picking up trash in front of his apartment. Has anyone else noticed that the later into the night it gets, the more gold gets handed out? One guy in my town repeatedly got arrested for driving a horse-drawn carriage down the road without headlights. Not a cop or a lawyer but I just saw on the news that these kids that are pretty young decided to go on a chase with state troopers thinking they would stop chasing them after they crossed a county line. Nope. Still in Texas means they will hunt you down. Anyway. So the cops continue to chase them down the expressway and the kids are live streaming this on Facebook, talking mad smack about how the cops have nothing on them and they need to leave them alone. It ends with the kids getting their car tires popped and them going off into the side and the cops telling them to get on the ground while they cry and apologize to their moms. Turns out one of their friends in the car was a fugitive. He was really young. I think I read somewhere that 2 of the 3 kids are fugitives but I don't have confirmation. Pretty wild stuff. I got arrested and fined for standing on a road for 2 minutes. First and only day in court. I am not a police officer but I have a friend living in my basement who was arrested and charged for assault with a weapon. The weapon in question was a tomato. He threw it at his girlfriend and she called the cops and pressed charges. He pleaded guilty and is now on probation for 12 months. I once read a case file about a guy who got arrested for hotboxing his car while blocking the only entrance to his apartment complex. Defense attorney here. Had a client who got pulled over for having a headlight out or something. Watching the bodycam footage from his arrest, the cop was talking to him and asked why he smelled weed. Client goes, "Oh, it's probably this joint here," and hands the thing to the cop. Sticking a damn pineapple up his ass and then walking into Walmart naked with the pineapple still up in his cheeks. Not a lawyer or police officer. A high school friend's brother was arrested for a minor incident. A few days later he returned to our small town police station during the night and used a knife to flatten the tires of several police cars. It was an easy bust for the police. They followed his foot tracks to his house in the newly fallen snow. My Bill and his friends were arrested for stealing helium balloons. Stoned. Dropping my sister home. They say a car sales lot with loads of helium balloons on display. They went home. Got some scissors. Came back and started taking balloons. The police turn up and separated them. One friend asked why. The police responded, "So you don't starburst. Run off in different directions." The friend asked, "Like this?" and proceeded to do star jumps, jump up and down, spreading your arms and legs out each jump. The police laughed at him and made them tie the balloons back. Then let them go.